No, I just basically wanted to know about your journey and how you decided to pursue a career as a barrister.
Yeah. So I feel like I went to school a long time ago now. I went to secondary school in Ireland. So I was born in London. I grew up in Ireland. And in Ireland, we didn't have the chance to do any kind of law A level. So I kind of just went in a bit blind. I was like, I think I want to do law. I think it sounds really interesting. And then I went to UE in Bristol, did my law degree, and then I did some paralegaling for a while. And then I was set on, yep, I want to be a barrister. I think it took quite a long time because I didn't really know anyone in law. My parents didn't do law, so it was very much kind of asking anyone. So if I had a friend, I remember I had a friend who was dating someone whose dad was a barrister. And I remember asking her, hi, can you ask him if I can shadow him? So it was, just really asking anyone that would give me one day and shadowing them. And then I did some paralegaling for a few years because I think initially when I started, I thought property law was quite interesting. I enjoyed it at university. So I worked in it for 2 years and then realized I absolutely don't want to do property law at all. um, and I did some volunteering with an organization called, they were called Personal Support Unit. They're now called Support Through Court. And people would go in who couldn't afford to have a lawyer, and you would give them help them work through witness statements, and you would go to court with them. You wouldn't represent them, but you would just kind of support them through the process.
Yeah.
And that was when I was studying my bar course. And it was when I was doing that I kind of realized, family law is quite interesting. I quite like family. And that kind of then set me on the path to pursuing family law. I suppose in between, so I did law degree, paralegaling. I went back and did a master's in law because I thought that would be interesting. And then I did my bar course and then moved to London. Then I worked for a charity for a while. And then I did more paralegaling. And then I started my training to be a barrister, which is pupillage, where you do 12 months training. First half, you kind of shadow, you learn. Second half, you get to do your own cases. Um, yeah, so that's kind of feels like it was quite a long time, I think. I think when I look back, it would have been very helpful to have someone at the start to say, this is what you need to do. This is where you can go. Because there was just things I didn't really know. So I did, when you do a bar course, it's very expensive. I think now it's like, I think around £18,000 in London. It's incredibly expensive. And I, couldn't afford that. And back when I was applying, you can apply for a scholarship. And I remember I applied to one and I did my first interview and I just went in blind. I didn't know, what to wear. I mean, I didn't, it was such an odd thing because no one I knew had gone and done it. So I remember I went along and I had like a light blue blouse on, which I thought was very nice. And I got there and everyone else was in black or black and white. And I thought, okay, maybe there's a dress code that I just don't know about. Went in, did the interview, went terribly. It was awful. Came out, had a bit of a cry, and was like, okay, that was bad. Let's think about how we can do this better. And that's when I did my masters and at uni met people who were on the same path as me, who were going for the bar. And there was a friend of mine, and we just sat and did loads of mock interviews together for the scholarship. And then I applied to a different inn, my current inn, in a temple, and they gave me a full scholarship for all my fees and some money towards my rent, which meant that I could do the bar course. But I think, yeah, it's been quite a long journey.
No, it sounds really interesting. How did you sort of, did you know that from the beginning that you wanted to be a barrister at the end of all of this? Or did you kind of figure it out as you went along with the paralegaling and everything?
I think I always knew that I wanted to be a barrister, but I think when I was younger, I didn't quite understand what a barrister was. So I
Mm.
think I thought, yes, I really like advocacy, I really like debating and things like that, and it sounds really interesting. But I think the realities of being a barrister is something that I learned when I was paralegaling and when I was shadowing barristers, because I think sometimes people think it's really glamorous and we get to, go to really fancy courts and just have a lovely time when actually we spend a lot of time on trains, traveling places. Sometimes we're, in a court, in a conference room without any windows or really kind of artificial lighting, and you're there all day. Um,
Yeah.
so I think what I thought it was is a bit different, but I think that's why it's really important having, to do the experience to figure out, no, this is actually what I want to do, because it's a great job. I mean, I get to go and speak for clients. I get to speak, in front of judges and argue points and cross-examine people. So I think, yeah, I think I knew I wanted to do it, but I think didn't quite know what it was when I was younger.
Yeah. I think right now where I'm at, I'm sort of at the point in where you are sort of doing your masters. I'm doing my masters in law, but it's a conversion course. So it's like sort of everything about law into 1 year, and then sort of just it's more vocational rather than anything else. It's just like trying to get you ready for the next step, like prepped and go. Like there's not a minute to breathe. Because they're trying to teach us everything that you learn in 3 years in such a short space of time. And a lot of it is like a lot of people complain about how it's not very philosophical. Like you don't stop and consider why the law is the way it is, stuff like that. Because I did philosophy and psychology for my undergrad. So I'm used to asking questions for why, pausing and dwelling on one thing for like a month, and then writing about that. Whereas this is like you learn it, you apply it, and then you know how to use it, and then you're gone. What kind of advice would you give me in terms of trying to sort of absorb everything together, sort of thing? Because it's so fast paced. Um, from your sort of journey, what would you recommend?
I think it's figuring out what works for you and how you absorb information, because I think for some people, they like to kind of watch lectures online while they're walking somewhere. Some people like to write everything down. So I think firstly figuring out how do you take in information. Because for me, I remember I got some really nice colored highlighters and I did like little diagrams and tables that I found really helpful. And for me, that was how I was able to kind of take in information, but I had to physically kind of write it down longhand. So I had to write everything out and read it quite a few times to take it in, because I think some people can read something once and it's in their brain forever. That was absolutely not me. So I think figuring out how is best for you to take in information. And then I think organizing your time, because I think absolutely right. On the MA, it's just a jam packed year where they're fitting in so much. And it's a very different approach to kind of, you said, like thinking about things and getting to explore ideas. I think organizing your time in terms of, for me, I would always have like a plan at the start of the day. I mean, I still do this now for things that are urgent and things that will be quick to do.
Yeah.
So if I have kind of a list of 10 things, I can cross out the quick ones and then I go through them in terms of urgency.
Yeah. Alternatively, I've heard online that people are doing the eat the frog method. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's called eat the frog. So you make a list of the same thing, as you said, like a similar thing, and then you eat the frog, like the hardest thing, you digest it first,
Yeah.
and then everything else is that I go back and forth between the two. For me, it's so tempting to get rid of the easy stuff first, but then I'll be like tired from that, and then I won't be able to do the big stuff. So I go back and forth depending on my mood. But that's really useful. Thank you.
I think
Um,
instead of that, people say like doing like the hard task first. So that
yeah,
it's the
that's
way.
the one. It'll feel good, and then the little bits are just easy.
I
But
think it depends, because sometimes you're just so tired and you're just, I kind of just want to have a bit of a break or do the easier things. So I think it's such a personal thing. I think whatever works best for you. And I think having obviously, your breaks and however you kind of wind down from studying. But yeah, I think that is also, heard like doing the trickiest thing first and then
yeah,
the little things seem easier.
what has been the most like difficult and challenging part of your pupillage so far?
I think so. I did pupillage at a different chambers, and I've now moved to my current chambers. I'm at New Court Chambers. I think one of the the strangest things is before I did pupillage, I was a paralegal in a small firm in Covent Garden for 2 years with the two directors. So it's the two directors and me. And it was brilliant. I had such a fantastic time with them because they were both great. And I think learning from them and the way they would approach cases and the kind of training they gave me was just excellent. And they let me go to court all the times and see different barristers. So it was kind of very strange to go from being quite involved in a case in terms of like meeting clients, drafting witness statements, going through disclosure, going to court, to then start pupillage where you take a step back and you just observe.
Yeah.
So it's very strange because then you're in a courtroom and you're, taking a note for your supervisor, but you can't really have a view as a pupil. You're there to learn, and it's not really for you to say what your view of the case is because that's your supervisor's job, and they're the barrister. So I think it was quite strange for me to go from having been so involved. I did lots of, call them care proceedings, lots of work in that kind of area, and then going to court and then just having my own thoughts about things and how things might go, but actually not being able to say very much. That was quite strange. And I think it's just quite an odd experience. I mean, I think you learn so much. I mean, you're observing people all the time and the cases they do and the way they do things. But I did actually find the first 6 months more difficult than the second 6 months, which I think people sometimes say is strange because the second 6 months you're doing your own cases and you're off on your own. I just loved that. I just was, ready to just, get going. So I think, that was almost quite strange. I think going into it in a different way.
Yeah. So I sort of so I did philosophy psychology for my undergrad, and in complete honesty, this is me being completely transparent. The law masters was like a panic masters for me. So a lot of people on my course, they knew from the beginning that they wanted to do law, and this has been their thing for their whole life. I decided probably like 3 weeks before the start of the course that I should do this. And for me, I think law, I'm becoming more passionate and more like interested in it as I go. But at first, it definitely wasn't one of my like main passions. I definitely love like debating, arguing, like humanities, and I'm finding love for it. But naturally, for me, I'm very creative. I was very much like I have my other passions, and this was more like the safer option, safety net for me, which I'm now learning to love. I went into it telling myself I'd be a barrister by the end of it. But I think for me, the reason being was because I love talking and I love speaking and I love like arguing and fighting for people. And I'm very outspoken and I'm very like I'm very so I feel like I've heard that you have to be a little bit like bitchy, a little bit, and in court to be able to represent. I'm not sure. I've heard that, and people told me that I can present like that if I want to. I don't know if that's like a useful trait,
I mean,
but
I don't think you do.
okay,
Personally, every advocate's very different. My style as an advocate is I'm very calm.
okay,
And my kind of role is normally if there's I call it kind of like human chaos. You walk into this case and everything's just crazy. And your job is to come in and calm everything down and to find out what the issues are and to try and resolve them. That's how I go about things. Every advocate is different and every advocate has a different style. Um, I don't think you need to be bitchy to be firstly to be a barrister or to be a good barrister, because I think it's almost it's less about you and it's more about your client. So I think sometimes people have a certain style and that's the way that they want to run a case. For me, I always kind of come back to, well, what does my client need from me? And so far I've not had a client that needs me to be bitchy because I don't think it helps anyone really. I mean, I don't think that it helps put your client's case. I don't think it helps the judge in understanding what's happening. I don't think it helps the other parties. So I think there's lots of different styles of advocacy, and I think at different times you might need a different style. So for example, if you're setting out a summary, for example, to the judge about what has happened, you can be quite neutral, or you can put, for example, if you're for a local authority, you could be quite neutral setting out what's happened. And that would be a very different style of advocacy to if you were cross-examining someone, which
yeah,
is a lot more direct.
yeah,
So I think there's so many different advocates, all with their own styles. And I think it's about finding out and also what works for you, because I think sometimes we think that we might see someone and we think, oh, we should, adopt that style and that would work for me. But actually it's such a personal thing. And I think figuring out, what makes you a really good advocate might just be this unique thing that you have.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that because when you look at movies and all these stereotypical representations of court, everyone's like very much direct and standing their ground and trying to prove a point and very much like I'm right, you're wrong sort of presentation. Which it when you say it, it seems obvious. Like it shouldn't be like that. You're there to provide a sense of calm and clarity to the whole thing, or all of the chaos, and actually reach a conclusion that's like fair for everyone rather than just stand your ground and prove you're right when you might not be, for example.
But I think
Um,
that's a lot of what we see. Absolutely. That's a lot of what we see in kind of when we look at what we think a courtroom drama is or how cases run.
Even I saw my first tribunal a few weeks ago. I think the Girls Network took us, and one of the I think the second one we saw was very much calm and fair. But I remember the first one we saw was very much the person the I don't know what they're called. I no, I do know what they're called. The not defendant. I should know this. I'm doing a
Respondents?
master. No, it was a different word. We call it claimant at uni, but
Yeah. Are they the person bringing the claim?
yes.
Yeah, claimant. Yeah.
No, but it was a different word. I don't know. For some reason, it was different. In at uni, we call it claimant as well. I think not defendant, respondent. I'm not sure.
Respondents. Yeah, the respondent's the opposite to claimant.
But then maybe it was claim. Yeah, the claimant. We were all on her side. We were all rooting for her, and she seemed like she was correct in what she was saying. But the barrister that was cross-examining her was very much sort of direct, standing her ground, not letting her sort of. It, obviously, it's letting her speak, but like not cutting her off, but almost like misleading her words and this and that a little bit. It seemed a bit like that directness was there. So for me, I'm not like that naturally, but I can adopt that when I need to prove a point. I feel like everyone can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's exactly, I think that's, exactly what I mean in terms of different styles of advocacy. So there's different types of advocacy that require different, approaches. And again, I don't know the case, I don't know what they were running, but there might have been a reason they adopted that. That might just be their natural style. I think cross-examination is a very kind of special type of advocacy where you can, we say, like, you put things to the witness, so you can say, well, you were wrong about this when you, or you actually, whatever it is. So it's a very different style of advocacy, and it is more forceful, and I think it is more direct, absolutely. But also I think you're kind of controlling the evidence sometimes, because sometimes you have witnesses who will just go on and on and on about things that actually aren't relevant or aren't answering your question.
Where you want, which obviously benefits your side of the case, right?
I
Obviously.
think, yeah, absolutely. I think direct them where you want them to go, but also what's going to help the court, what's going to help the court in making a decision. But yeah, there's so many different styles, and I think if you have time, go along to the criminal courts, watch some, trial advocacy where it'll be very different. And again, even in the family courts, a lot of the family courts are private proceedings; you can't go in. But in the High Court, sometimes you can go in and watch committal proceedings, for example. You can go to the Court of Appeal, which again is another different style of advocacy because it's all very legal. So I think it really depends on, I think, the type of case it is, and the type of advocate it is, and everyone's just very different.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think I want to know as well, what is sort of like a day in the life of you, like as a barrister? What is like sort of your everyday life? What does it look like? What does your schedule sort of look like? I want to know what it'd be like, for example, if I was to become a barrister in the future, what would my life sort of almost look like?
So you never really know. That's the one thing. So it changes. We don't have, because we're self-employed, we don't have kind of like set office hours. So for example, Monday, I woke up, I went to a court, all the courts just blur into one, can't remember which one, traveled to court, met my client. So my case is at 10 a.m., met my client at 9 a.m. to talk about their case, give them some advice. Then I spoke with the other party in the case, went into the judge, did the court hearing, came out, spoke to the client again, gave them some more advice, and then traveled back to chambers. And then we do like notes for solicitors. We tell the solicitor what happened at court. And then I might start reading my papers for the next day. So next week I have two trials. So this afternoon I'm going to be prepping those and going through court bundles and marking them up. But I think it changes. So that might be one day. Another day it might be I have a case at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I have a meeting at 4:30 with other advocates for a different case, and then I'm prepping again. So I think no day is the same. And I think you have to kind of get quite used to just adapting your day. So for example, I could have a case in tomorrow that, let's say, I might have, started to prepare for, that actually just comes out for whatever reason. That maybe there's no judges available to hear it, or it's not, whatever the reason is. And then I might get another case go in. So I'll get a new set of papers to look at, or I might have a free day. So I think it's no case, no day is the same because it changes so much depending on what you're doing. But I really like that. So I think some of my friends who work, other jobs that are very 9 to 5, they just don't. I could never have, where you just don't know kind of what next week looks like. But then sometimes you do, because you might have, I think I've got a few weeks in April where I actually know one week. I think I've got cases almost every day, so I kind of know what that week looks like. So it changes a lot. But then you have a lot of freedom because you're self-employed. So if you want to go home after your case, you can. If you want to come into chambers and see other people and do work, you can. So I think you have that freedom as well, which is very nice. But I think if you want like a set routine job where you're in the same place, it's probably not being a barrister, because it just changes so much.
And I feel like that's the fun of it, because I know that solicitors are more like employed and barristers are more like self-employed, so that gives you more control and freedom of when you work. Is it true? Like, does it give you more freedom of when you work and when you don't want to work, and what you do and what cases you take on, stuff like that?
So it gives you more flexibility in terms of when you want to work. So I can say I want to book off 2 weeks, I want to go on holiday, but I'm self-employed, so I won't get paid for those 2 weeks. So I
Yeah.
don't get holiday pay, but you do have that flexibility to say, I'm off, I want to book a few weeks off and go on holiday. In terms of the cases we take, so there's a rule called the cab rank rule. So like with taxis, when you go to get a taxi and you go to the taxi rank, you've got to go to the first taxi in the taxi rank and they will take you somewhere. It's the same with cases. So if a case comes in, I don't get a say over whether or not I want to do it. It just goes in.
Okay.
Unless, of course, there would be a conflict. For example, if I represented the other party, before, but, we can't say no to cases. And the reason is that it would be unfair. So, for example, if I picked up a case and thought, oh, well, I don't really know if I want to do this, that's
Yeah.
not fair for that person. So we don't get to pick what cases we do. We get to kind of narrow down our area. So family is so broad. I mean, you can do international children, money, public children, private children, surrogacy. There's a huge amount of things you can do. So I do just children. So that kind of helps me narrow down the kind of work I want to do.
What you want to be involved in. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just go where I'm told. So I'll have a look and I'll say, oh, you're going to Croydon tomorrow for a case. And yeah, off I go.
Yeah. I want to also ask, what is the sort of dynamic and procedure between a solicitor and a barrister? Sort of, how do you guys sort of communicate? What is the communication like? Like, do you guys meet up or have meetings to like pass on the information before like a court? Because I know obviously they do all of the, tell me if I'm wrong, but did they do all of the interviewing the actual client, for example? They do all of the compiling of information, research, and then do they pass it on to you? And then how does that work exactly? How does the tele and communication sort of work?
So absolutely right. They do all the kind of before work. So they'll meet with the client, do a witness statement for the client, put the court bundle together, things like that, make inquiries, get the documents in. And then they, for example, let's say a mum goes to a solicitor and she says, I want to go to court to have an arrangement about when my child sees the father. They will go into a solicitor, the solicitor will meet with them, might do a statement with them, then we'll do the court application, send it off to court, and there will be a court date listed. Let's say it's next week. And then the solicitors, sometimes solicitors do their own advocacy as well, and they go to court and they can do the hearing. But solicitors then will call up a barrister's chambers. So, for example, if they called up my chambers, they would speak to the clerks and they would say, oh, who's available for 2 p.m. in Croydon for this case? And they'll say, oh, we've got this person available or this person. They'll say, yeah, happy to book in Iona. So I get it booked in. My clerks will then email like I'll get in my diary, I'll see, oh, I'm going to Croydon on this, on this date. And then the solicitor will email over to my clerks that get sent through to me the court bundle, which has all the documents in it, and a brief. And a brief is instructions to counsel. This is what, this is what the case is about. This is what the client wants. And then you don't really have any other communication unless the solicitor, something else comes in and they say, oh, I've got to add this, or if the solicitor has a question, and then you just go to court and you meet the client for the first time at court. So I think it depends, because some kind of more complex cases, solicitors might actually want a conference, so a meeting with them, the client and the barrister before the court hearing to maybe talk about some kind of complex issues or something that they want to raise. But usually the communication is actually relatively limited, unless it's a complex case.
Because you think that, because any case like has so much layers to it, and even like the most simple cases, I've read a few, the files and stuff, they have like piles and piles of papers. You'd think that an in-person meeting would be due just to sort of explain sort of thing. Even for me, I hate messaging people or emailing people. I always prefer a phone call because I find it easier to communicate, even the slightest bit of thing, anything. So you'd think that like to communicate such a like a case or something, you'd have a bit more of a conversation sort of.
You can sometimes. So sometimes you can speak to a solicitor. So you can always pick up the phone, speak to a solicitor, and sometimes I do. Or the solicitor might say, I actually need to talk to you about this before the hearing. So you can absolutely have that conversation. And I think it depends as well, because sometimes this might be your fourth time on the case.
Yeah.
So the solicitor knows you and you know the background. But sometimes if it's a first hearing, you might not have that opportunity to speak. But I think if it is important, so if the solicitor thought it was important to speak, or there was an issue that they weren't quite sure about, or they wanted to have a discussion beforehand, you absolutely can. I think it's just it is strange, I suppose, because they have such, they give us everything that we need, and then we meet the client for the first time at court. But I think what is good about that is that you might have, a barrister who might have a different view of something, because they are, we're independent. We just come along and we might have a different view on the case to what the solicitor has, or we might be in agreement with them. But I think it's kind of just having another pair of eyes to look over something and take a view on it.
Yeah, I think in terms of like, because right now, as I mentioned, I really went into it thinking I was going to be a barrister. I was really like leaning towards and passionate about it, and then now I'm back into the sort of solicitor side, because I told myself it's maybe easier a little bit, or like easier to get in, and it's easier to do and easier to sort of practice. I think, I don't know, like, what do you have to say to that sort of thing? Do you think that it's easier between the two?
I think in terms of the amount of training contracts that are available compared to pupilages,
The likelihood.
yeah, I think there is, you're kind of, going off percentages, there are more spots available than there are for pupillage. But
Competitive in that sense, isn't it then?
yeah, so it's, pupillage is really, really competitive, but so are training contracts. But I think there's just more available because you have bigger firms that can have, more spaces. But I think it depends, because I think there's also lots of solicitors who cross qualify. So solicitors who start off as solicitor.
This is exactly what I was going to ask you. Like, how does that exactly work? And can I maybe do that in the future?
So I don't know specifically how it works, but my understanding is that if someone is called as a solicitor, they can do, it's kind of called an abridged pupillage. So it's like a small version of pupillage, I think for 3 to 6 months. Then they can practice as a barrister. I think they still need to do the bar course and things like that. So I'm not entirely clear on how it works, but it is something that people do. So some people start as solicitors and then cross qualify and become barristers. But also we have solicitors now doing a lot more advocacy than they have previously. So solicitors can run cases. So I think it depends, but I think I think doing as much, I would say like shadowing solicitors and barristers as much as you can to give you, a decision on kind of what you want to do. Because I think, I mean, the Girls Network has, they're brilliant and lots of support in terms of putting you in touch with people about, seeing this or seeing that. And I think it's figuring out what role you want to play in a case, because some people really do like that building role, where you're involved with a case the whole way through and you see it through to the end, whereas barristers kind of drop in and drop out. So I think that there is absolutely more training contract spots available. It's also very, very competitive, but I wouldn't let just that put you off.
Yeah.
Because I think, if it is absolutely something you want to do, you can always apply, and then in between doing a bar course or getting pupillage, work in a law firm and, get that experience in a solicitor's firm. That would absolutely help when you're a barrister.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that. I think that gives me a bit more reassurance as to what my potential future will look like.
And there's
Um,
also so many jobs in law. There's not just solicitor or barrister. There's so many you can do.
what, what else is there? Because I know solicitor, barrister, obviously paralegal as well. What other ones just
I
off the
mean, you
top?
can do kind of in-house counsel, so you can be an employed barrister with a firm. You can
Okay.
have people who have a law degree and go on to do, I mean, really anything. It's such a transferable skill. People go into the civil service with a law degree. People go on to do advocacy kind of in, the charitable sector. It's just really, really broad. And I think that it really varies depending on what kind of area you're interested in and then what kind of job you want. But I think one thing is that it's very transferable. So whatever you're learning on your law degree and that kind of thinking and that kind of, looking at the law and applying it and moving on, that that way of thinking, as with your other degree, is really, really helpful, whatever way you want to go. But there's just so many different opportunities, I think, with a law degree.
Yeah. I've been told that it opens a lot of doors. That's what I was hearing a lot of when people were like trying to convince me to do it, and I was in like two minds about doing it. But I think that's the main thing, is because it's interesting. All of it, like I'm enjoying learning about it and everything. So it's interesting. It's enjoyable, and then you can use it in a lot of places, not just barrister, solicitor. But I don't think there's anyone in my class and group of people on the course with me who are doing anything else apart from solicitor or barrister. Even barrister is very rare in the class that I have, especially because the uni I'm at university is very like SQE focused.
Mhm.
So I think there's literally 4 to 5 people wanting to be a barrister, and the rest are just all solicitors. And I was the only one who was still in two minds. And it's really funny because the deadline for the course change is actually tomorrow, and I'm currently on the barrister route. But I'm thinking I was gonna do it last week, but then I thought let me speak to you first and see if I change my mind after this conversation. But I think I should change it to solicitor, and then in the future, if I will want to speak and I will want to sort of do advocacy, I think maybe I should cross qualify in the future.
You can,
Um,
there's no kind of wrong answer because I think you're at such an early stage, whatever route you go down, um, if you want to be a solicitor or barrister, you still have to do a further degree. You still have to do the, I think it's the LPC or the bar course,
it's the
whatever.
SQE now, which is a lot
SQE.
more harder. They
SQE.
say it's easier apparently, but the SQE they say is a lot more difficult compared to the old LPC.
I mean, maybe I don't know. I mean, I think, but whatever route you decide with the MA, you'll still have to do a further set of exams. So again, I just think there's no rush because I think it's really hard sometimes to know when you're at the start of everything. What do I want to do?
Exactly. And I feel like it's literally the deadline is tomorrow and I still haven't solidly decided. Even solicitor, like I'm doing it, but then I'm thinking in the future I'll still be able to qualify. So I'm still not set on it just by itself. And the reason why they make us choose now is because it's a PGDL plus either a dissertation, which gives you the master's,
Mhm.
or a PGDL plus the SQE1, which gives you the master's.
Oh, I see.
So if you do the SQE1, you might as well you're halfway to becoming a solicitor. You can't really go back and then say, no, I want to be a barrister. It doesn't make sense. Whereas if you want to be a barrister, it's PGL plus dissertation and then going on to do the BPC pupillage route sort of thing.
Mhm.
So which is why I was confused and not picking the course sort of until now.
I think it's very
so
hard
so
to know, I think, so early on. But I mean, I think,
yeah,
going down the solicitor route, as you said, you can, solicitors, depending on what area you go into, in family law, solicitors do their own advocacy. I was at court this morning. My opposing, about the person on the other side was a solicitor representing their client. So, quite often you do have solicitors come along representing their client at court. So it depends. And you do always have that option to cross qualify.
yeah, because in terms of like the lifestyle of the barrister versus the lifestyle of the solicitor, for me, I think the solicitor route attracted me a bit more just because it was like more. The thing is, I have my own mini business on the side as well, so I'm very used to like the self-employed sort of aspect and stuff. So I wanted something that on the other end gives me some sort of stability and sort of like sort of predictability almost.
Mhm.
So I thought that would be better. And I like talking to clients, talking to people. I like doing that. So I thought that, but then I thought it was like a shame because then in my head I was like, I'm not going to be able to speak and advocate. And but if you're saying I can do that as a solicitor, that makes me feel good because then I can
You
speak.
get in family law, we have solicitors who, I'm not sure if you need to kind of apply for something to be able to, I don't know, but
Yeah,
absolutely, we have solicitors on cases who come in and speak for their clients, who I will speak with, who will kind of do, speaking in court, which is what, you typically was just what barristers do, but absolutely solicitors do that now. I think sometimes it's when it gets more complex, they will sometimes step back and then they'll bring in a barrister. But
yeah.
absolutely, depending on what area of law you go into, family law definitely has solicitors doing advocacy.
Okay, that's so interesting. Thank you so much. Honestly, it's given me a lot of reassurance.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no right answer or wrong answer. I think it's whatever sometimes, and I think whatever you think you'll do better in. So if you're like you said, you're halfway through. If you do the SQE1 and you're halfway through, you
yeah,
continue with that. But there's nothing to say that in a few years, if you wanted to change your mind, you can't do that because you absolutely can.
yeah. I think yeah, no, you're right. Especially with me, is because even I'm like halfway through the PGL. Done obviously time one, and then time two started in January. So more than halfway almost. But for me, it still feels like I started law. Like it was even introduced to the world of law like yesterday. Before October, I hadn't I had never done law, like, or even known the difference properly between a solicitor and a barrister. I realized that when I got here, because in movies and in shows and stuff, you hear it's very much because it's very much Americanized. So in
Yeah.
America, obviously, they just have lawyers and like attorneys, they call it. So it's very much they do everything, they do both. Whereas here, the differentiation matters, and they're two different roles and two different things. So when I was applying, that's when I sort of became introduced to the world of law, and it feels like it's the time's gone so fast, and now I'm having to really pick where I'm going to go, because so far it's just been like, oh, I'm feeling it out, I'm studying, like learning about law, but I'm just learning.
Mhm.
As of tomorrow is from the deadline. Now it's like, okay, you're about to become one or the other, you need to pick. So it's more pressure.
It is,
But yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
But
you can.
again, there's no right or wrong answer. Genuinely, I think whatever one you decide to do, it's not as though you're stuck, and it's not as though I've made my mind up and I'm stuck with this.
Yeah, I have been putting it off until literally the deadline, which is tomorrow, since October, because I did not want to pick. I still wanted some time to think, but I've realized I might as well just rip the band-aid off, pick one. Picking one is better. Picking one and wrong is better than just thinking about it and not doing, just thinking about it and not doing, picking, making a decision, I guess.
But
So
but I don't even think whatever you pick will be wrong because whatever route you go down, you
mm,
can change it. So
yeah,
even if you decide to go down the barrister route and you say, well, actually, this isn't for me, you can still go
then
back and do the solicitor or vice versa. So there is no wrong answer, and I think whatever way you go, if it's going down the solicitor route and then you decide to change over to being a barrister, there will be no criticism of
yeah,
people saying, oh well, I can't, why did you pick at all.
like wrong, yeah, no, yeah. Honestly, thank you so much for this. Honestly, it was really insightful, and I really enjoyed speaking to you.
Are you coming
Thank
to our Women in Law Day in
you.
October?
Oh yes, I think I'm not sure if Ravina's there. Maybe I don't know if that's the one she mentioned to me. I
We've
don't know
got
if
it
she
on.
is.
I think it's the check. I think it's the 6th of October. But we have, I mean, the whole day is about, what a barrister does, what a solicitor does, what do judges
Yeah,
do. Um,
I'd love
I don't know. Yeah.
to. I think yeah, that would be great. I'd love to come to that because that will be so. I am going to change it to the SQE today. Like I'm going to send the email finally. Thank God. And I think by then if I'm correct, I'll probably start my SQE training in September. So I'll be right at the beginning of the sort of solicitor journey. So it'll be really cool
Yeah,
to sort
it's
of
great. It's a really fun day. We have it at so in with barristers, they have kind of inns of court. So we have four of them. So we have, I always compare it to Harry Potter, like the Hogwarts
yeah,
houses.
it sounds like that. And I've seen pictures and like media from it, and it just has the same sort of vibe, like the sorting hat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Harry Potter vibes. That's always what I think of. So we've had it at different inns of court each year. So this year we have it at Gray's Inn. But yeah, the whole day is really just kind of exactly a lot of what we talked about. What does a solicitor actually do? What does a barrister actually do? We have some judges coming at the end who are brilliant, who, tell everyone about their day, what it means to be a judge, what do they do, their background. Last year we had someone who's just become a King's Counsel, so a kind of the top level barrister. They came and talked about their journey to becoming King's Counsel, which was really interesting. So yeah, it's a good day. We do debates and things. So I think, yeah, we'll have it in October.
It's an in-person event, obviously, I'm assuming,
In
right?
person, yeah. So we have, so I just kind of get together a bunch of solicitors, barristers, paralegals, solicitor apprentices, kind of everyone.
That's
Um, and then Rabina gets everyone from the Girls Network to come along, and then we just bring everyone together, and then we just have a whole day. But it's been really good, yeah.
nice. That's really cool. And I'd love to come to that, honestly. I'll put it in my calendar
Yeah, I'll
for
get
sure.
Rabina. Rabina can send you the
Yeah, I
details.
don't know if she's still there. I don't know if she's gone, but no, it was really lovely talking to you. If you like, we can stay in touch, and maybe I can.
Absolutely,
If I have any questions, maybe I can contact you if that's okay.
absolutely do. Yeah,